Right. So today's all about training post 40 and kind of just what that looks like, and how to optimize your training plan in general. I hear it a lot. I heard a lot from people about how they want to train based on how they used to train. Normally from people that are sort of late 30s, 40s, 50s, talking about training like they were in their 20s. Now, it's not to say that people aren't capable of what they are in their 20s. Of course they are. But today's more about awareness around what's happening so that people can get really efficient in how they actually attack their training and understand their body to what I believe will be the desired result that they're actually looking to get out of their program. We'll get to it in a second. This kind of happens across the board. And this isn't just people in their 40s or 50s trying to train like they're teenagers or 20-year-olds. It's across every age demographic that I see in any sort of fitness routine. It's really just inefficient programming or training that prioritizes the wrong things, really. It's about body composition. It's about being super lean and toned and incredibly strong, or sort of earning the weekend through lots of high intensity movement. And unfortunately, this all comes at a cost. None of this is efficient for the body. None of it really optimizes someone's health. And the cost will come at some stage. And you may not feel that in your 20s, purely because everyone's so energetic. You know, I like to think you've got a really large battery life in your 20s. The body's so robust in its nature that you can kind of get away with the inefficiencies in your routine, but not so much later in life. And today I want to delve into why that is the case and how people can actually frame their training. This is of all ages, because the cost comes later anyway. And most people I talk to in their 30s, in their 40s, in their 50s, even if they were training early on, now are reaping the cost of overuse injuries based on the training methods they were doing then, or the things that they weren't considering were actually or should be prioritized in their program. A nice stat is approximately 50% of your gym-related injuries are from overuse and overtraining. So by that stat alone, you can infer that whatever people are doing in their training and movement routines is potentially not the optimal way to do those routines. Because a modality of health being movement and fitness should be a real benefit to your life and moving you closer to the goals that you have. And I don't want to speak for everybody, but for most people, being injured is not one of those goals. So most people need to sort of revisit their thought process around what is effective movement and how do they truly get the benefit of this modality to actually push them further towards their goals. So we've got, as I've discussed, like I like to think of like late teenagers and 20-year-olds as kind of an energizer bunny with like an endless battery life. You can kind of do whatever you want. You don't really notice it when you're in it, but you can stay up late, go to work the next day. You can train for hours on end, come back to the gym, do the same thing the next day. The body's ability to rebound is just incredible in those time periods. There's a real downside to it, though. And the downside is it doesn't actually give people the drive to change what they're doing, even though it would be the actual best benefit to their body and actually get them better results, which is unfortunately the contrast you get later in life, in your 30s and 40s, where things just inevitably change. A little bit less energy, or energy levels are harder to come by. You generally need more recovery and more sleep to regain those energy levels. You just need to take better care of yourself when it comes to food and workout protocols to stay less stiff, less sore, and in less pain. By no doubt, you're just as capable. Everyone is. It's just to a point, and that's where I want to get to, because the strength, the endurance, the body composition, the optimal health related to your program that most people generally want out of their training program can be achieved. It's just not by looking at what you were doing when you were 20 or what 20-year-olds are doing, because 9 times out of 10, they're not doing the right things anyway. They just have the rebound to get away with a really inefficient program. The older body just doesn't give you that leeway. So like for me, like I'm mid-30s at the moment. I'm about to have 2 kids under 2. What I need to get out of my program just needs to change comparatively to what it is when I was 20, or to keep up with, some of the 20-year-old, people in fitness or people on the gym floor. I can't keep up. And if I can, it's not very often. And I definitely feel the impacts of when I let my ego kick in and I actually try to keep up. And I'm much sorer than they are. I don't recover as well as they do. Everything's just different. The demands of my life are different. 2 kids under 2s doesn't give me a lot of time for sleep. Like my body's just different. It takes a lot more to get what I want out of my body in terms of strength, in terms of endurance, in terms of just my capacity to frequently move in the manner that I would like, just to keep the machine going. Hence, my priorities have changed. Like when it used to be, staying in shape, for most people that have listened, like I've come from like an overweight journey. It used to be to make sure I never went back to that. These days, it's more to implement, for me, it's actually proving to myself that I can keep some level of physical appearance while having kids. That's the real benefit for me. I used to really love challenging my body to do like marathons. I wanted to do an Ironman at some stage. These days, honestly, I just want to be able to run my dog. It's a much more important part of my life than any super challenge. I used to really drive hard strength standards for the major lifts, the bench press, the deadlift. These days, I just want to be able to hold my kid for long periods of time when he decides that the pram is no longer an option and we're 1.5 kilometers away from home. And where before a lot of those things would take precedence, these days it's about remaining injury free, because not only do I clearly not want to be in pain, but I really truly want to be able to do the things that I want to do as a dad for my kid. So my whole mentality around my training is clearly changed, but the execution, if I did want to do the other things, potentially I might not be able to do them anyway, based on just where I'm at and the demands that are currently placed on my life. And if people thought about it from that contextual lens, they'd set themselves up to win with their program a lot more. Doesn't mean those things won't come back for me. It just means they're probably not appropriate for me right now, because there's a cost benefit and I've got to pay the cost to get to the thing. And right now, the cost of not being able to like play with my kid and help out at home and run my dog are too big that I don't want to do the strength standards, ultra marathons, and the time that it's going to take, and potentially the repercussions to my body based on that. Hence, later life just seems to throw a few more spanners in the mix, which most people don't consider when they're looking at their training program. It's one of my biggest gripes on train like an athlete. Well, most people have work, and most people work 40 plus hours a week, and most people have family demands, and those things get in the way of what an athlete would normally do when they have 40 to 50 hours of free time that they're getting paid to then train in. It's a very different lifestyle and very different demands. So we want to come with some pillars today for optimizing your training later in life, but they're actually just the same pillars that I would use for every life stage. It's just the repercussions and the cost to you are greater later in life, because your body won't let you get away with inefficient training nearly as much. The cost will come. For me, the frame that I kind of think in is nothing is worth exhausting your body so much that you can't recover, that you're too exhausted to do your life properly, or if it gives you aches and pains. If any of those are occurring, you're just not training effectively. And that's really important. So I've got a couple of pillars. Pillar number 1 is to train full body when you're in the gym. Any day that you're in, you'll find with training programs, and the stats back this up, that frequency is more important than going all out less frequently. And that happens a lot on most training programs. People will go really hard once, twice a week, and then they're too exhausted to come back in. They're too sore. the muscular recovery takes too long because they may not be able to walk up the stairs or get out of bed properly because they've trained too hard, that doesn't yield nearly as good as results as training more frequently with less intensity. So we like to pair sort of to give context, a lower and an upper movement. This might be a squat or a goblet squat with a sort of chin up or a pull down. It could be a chest press with a hinge like a deadlift. This is incorporating a full body program into the days that you train. You could train as many days as you see fit. It really depends on your stage of your journey of where you're at. I recommend 3 days. 3 full body sessions, 45 to 60 minutes of strength training will be perfect to get most people the exact results that they want. With that, you get a couple of things actually. So you just get less overall volume going through the body. And that's important. So if you just do a standard bodybuilder approach, it might be sort of a chest day and then like a back day and then maybe a legs day, which means you're doing a lot of sets and a lot of reps and a lot of volume that equals into the said muscle group or part of the body. That creates lots of damage to the muscle. That damage then puts a real stress response into your nervous system. That nervous system then needs to try and adapt and recover based on the stress demands that you've placed on it. For most people, a bodybuilding style program that doesn't incorporate full body will put far greater stress than is actually necessary to get the level of adaptation that they're actually looking for. And then they don't recover very well. And then they're sore and they have pains more frequently and to a greater extent than they need. So they end up coming to the gym less. So their results aren't nearly as good. And there's a downside, which normally means that level of load will put lots of pressure through your joints, ligaments, and tendons, and lead to those overuse injuries that we see are 50% of the injuries in the gym, mainly due to those programs and the downstream effects of what they do. That's why training full body is far more important. The other thing is, if you do miss a day, because life's demanding and 3 days a week might not happen every week, that's okay. You've hit different muscle groups and the full body more often in that week, meaning that if it happened to be the chest day of your bodybuilding day that you missed, it means you didn't do it for a week, which means there's 13 to 14 days between activating that muscle again. And that is nowhere near as efficient and will not get you the results that you're after comparatively to if you're doing it 3 days a week. The second one, which is just standard across the board, is that I'd love people to move properly. Most people would tell you that they move properly, but most people don't do a great job of how they, honestly, just on how they perform standard movements in the gym. We want slower repetitions. That might mean every repetition, let's just say a squat, for example, to start at the top, to squat your way down to 90 degrees and then come back up, or squat down to a box and come back up. That might take 5 to 6 seconds in total. Most people at standard gyms will be up and down within a second or two. Slower repetitions with tempo, what we're trying to get out of that movement pattern is we're trying to create intensity through the movement, through technique and muscular activation. Now, that takes a bit of awareness. That normally takes some coaching for people to understand what to activate, when to activate, get the confidence throughout the movement to understand exactly what to do at what times. But there's a couple of benefits from this way of training. It's much safer. So that's a big tick. You're going to get injured far less. The reason being, slower movements mean you get a much better understanding of your body. It means you can actually analyze what's happening at what stages. It means it should stay into a muscular sequence as we're moving through the movement, not go into the joints, ligaments, and tendons, which lots of weight and faster tempo happens to do. As a coach, it allows me to see, is there biomechanical breakdown with what somebody's doing? And that's okay, because it means if there is, we can then assess what it is and actually put in a exercise or a program to make sure that that weakness becomes more of a strength. And it means you can stop the movement before it gets unsafe. It'll normally mean you also reduce the weight, because proper tempo, slower, with great muscular activation is actually really taxing for the body. Most people just don't know how to do this effectively. So they rely on faster tempo and lots of weight to try and get some intensity through the body. But that comes at a cost. And normally it's at a cost of someone's ligaments, tendons, and joints, hence the overuse injuries. Unfortunately, in this industry, it's much sexier to lift heavy than it is to do things properly. But for me, I don't find it sexy at all to have a blown rotator cuff or a bulging disc in my back comparatively to being able to do all the things that I need to do on a daily basis. Unfortunately, that normally takes somebody a few, different levels of their journey to realize before they make the switch and realize the cost benefit of certain actions within the gym. The third one is training effectively. So it should be stock standard, but the older you get, you need a warm up. If I was running short on time, I would cut some of my standard gym routine before I cut my warm up. Most times someone warms up, gets injured, it's because they're not warm and they go straight in. And I don't actually know the percentage, but often it won't cause an injury. But then the time that it does is normally due to that reason. I've done it with my neck. I've done it with my back. I'm running late. I'm just going to quickly jump in. It'll be okay. It's not okay. And it's always under those circumstances that it seems to happen. So you want to warm up, you want to get some blood flow, you're going to get your nervous system regulated, you're going to get the muscles working, and you're going to add in some stabilization type activation, which is just going to protect your ligaments, tendons, and joints. The contrary to that is you need a cool down. Even if it's short, it could be 60 seconds. What we're actually trying to do is decrease the stress that we've just caused in the workout, reduce some of the cortisol that's just peaked from working out, especially later in life. This is important because it's going to help kickstart our recovery. That's integral. The quicker and the quicker that we can start this recovery process, the better the results are going to be for you and the better your nervous system is going to recover from that. That's really important. Most people just run out the gym and tell me they're going to stretch at home. By recovery, I mean maybe some walking in some zone 2, maybe some breath work, maybe a sauna, some dynamic stretching. Any of that would be really good. In terms of the actual training program, we want more efficient training, less systemic load, better recovery, which is kind of everything that I've just touched on. But what does it actually look like? It actually looks like doing less heavy loading, so less lower reps. And people love training heavy all the time. And this is kind of like 3 to 4 reps and under often. If you're new to the gym, I don't love this anyway. But you just have to have a specific reason as to why you want to train in these rep ranges. The reason being, the more weight you lift, the more load you put through the body, the more stressed your body gets, the more at risk your ligaments, tendons, and joints are, the more you're probably going to break down your technical form on those lifts, which leaves you open to more injuries, which later in life, the cost benefit of those exercises just needs to be weighed up. You can get just as good and just as strong for most people, unless they need really specific training, doing 7 reps and above. It just gets rid of a lot of the cost factors that might happen at heavy lifting. Now, again, the more advanced you get with your training, the more you might periodize your actual training system to incorporate some of those things. I try to operate it more black and white to give framework. People just think I need to lift heavy to build strength, but you need to have a baseline of biomechanical awareness and understanding the technique and what's involved and where your limitations are and where your ceilings are in terms of your strength to really be able to do those lifts effectively. Once people are there, I have no issue. But until then, 7 to 15 is going to be an amazing place to start. You also want to put less intensity in your sessions. Like I like to think when I'm actually training, I just want to about 6 to 8 out of 10 is perfect for me. Most people try to go 10 out of 10 every session, can't get up off the floor, legs are jelly. You know, the reason that's not effective is due to the neural fatigue and just the sheer fatigue it puts through the whole system in the body. That makes it really difficult for your body to recover from. Comparatively to the frequency that we've been talking about, a 6 or a 7 out of 10, your body will get the right amount of catalyst, which the gym and movement portion of your routine is just the catalyst for change. That's all we're getting from that portion of our modality. All the adaptation from it happens in the recovery portion when you're not training. It comes in the nourishment of the food, it comes in the downtime and the rest periods and the sleep to actually get the adaptation. But if you train to a 10 out of 10 and completely overload your system and your nervous system, it means your recovery is much harder and often your sleep will be poorer, which means you don't maximize the adaptation that you've been trying to get from the catalyst of your training. So if people actually just came in and got a 6 out of 7 out of 10, 8 out of 10, most times they're in the gym, they would see far better results and have far fewer negatives with their movement routine. Another way you can think about it is choosing, let's just say most sort of circuits or supersets in the gym will have sort of 3 sets to them. You might do a bit of a warm-up set. You might do a sort of in-between set to get everything going. And then you might do a actual set with some intensity that's going to challenge you rather than trying to do all 3 sets at a level that are actually quite taxing. It's another really effective way to really be efficient with the strategies within the session to maximize what you're trying to get out of the session. I do it a lot with my training at the moment, having a young kid, to make sure that I can get the adaptation and get the recovery in. And that's one of the strategies that I use. I use that a lot more than ever lifting heavy in my compound movements like my squat, my deadlift, my chin up, my bench press. I find it too taxing for where I'm at in life and the stress demands I'm currently under. I like to utilize the last set of whatever the exercise is that I'm doing to try and generate some intensity and some volume in my training. The 4th pillar is prioritize your recovery. This is actually the thing I would build my entire program on and then reverse engineer where I actually put in my training days. People often try to put their training days in, let's say it's Monday, Wednesday, Friday, first, and then they try to recover from their training sessions rather than implementing your body can only do what it can do in those sessions based on the pillar of health of how robust your nervous system is and how much it's got to give to those sessions. And that comes from rest and recovery and whatever restoration practices you're doing to actually then be able to input the drive that you need from those sessions. That's kind of the flip side. I do it a lot with athletes who really don't think enough about recovery, but for the rest of us, it's a really integral part. So get your sleep in order, figure out how you can maximize it if it's a possibility, and what days are going to be rest days and what days are going to have restorative type practices. It could be breath work, it could be walking the block, it could be yoga, it could be Pilates, it could be saunas. They're all amazing tools, but I build them as the foundational pillar for my entire program. They give us access to the actual max output days. So if I was going to sort of sum it up, it's train full body, frequency is more important, train effectively, move properly, slow down your repetitions, feel the movement and get the right muscular activation, train effectively, don't lift as heavy as often. And if you are going to lift heavy, have a real reason as to where it fits into your program, not just let your ego take over. Prioritize your recovery. It's the most important thing that you can do for your health. And 5, the way I think about training is if I need to, nothing can get in the way of my mobility and my flexibility. They're integral. If I want to get strong, I need to get stable as well. If I'm going to lift heavy, I need to have a good reason and I need to have enough time to recover. And I haven't touched on it a lot, but I'll throw it in at the end. Make some time for your cardiovascular fitness. A mixture of zone 2 and some VO2 max will put you in a really good spot for a really robust health routine that will set you up for optimal health. Any questions?
Not so much questions, but thanks.
Jeffrey, I can't hear you.
You can't hear me? They're working now?
It
I can
is.
hear.
Yeah.
You can hear me?
Again.
Yep. Yeah, not so much question. Thanks for that session, by the way, but not so much question. But when I may or may not have started actually listening to you earlier this year and stopped going so hard and having active recovery, I stopped having those plateaus I was having last year. I think realized how important it was. And also for me, because I didn't start training until my 50s, I was never had the Energizer Bunny experience. Technique. So that's why I don't even listen to music or a podcast when I'm doing my strength days, because I know at my age it's going to be a lot easier to injure myself if I don't focus on making sure my technique is as close to perfect as it can possibly be.
Yeah, it's such a people just don't put enough emphasis on it. Like it's harder to perform the movements with great technique. Like it's often more painful. Like you can feel the muscular burn, and you have to think quite a lot about what's actually happening at that time. Which I understand why people generally don't do it, but they'd get far better results if they did, and it severely reduces your chance of injury. It's trying to get rid of the ego for most people, which is it's easier said than done, especially in a vanity type environment, which is most sort of gyms. But yeah, if people could, they'd get much better results. All right, that might. If there's nothing else, we'll wrap it up for today. But does anybody have anything else they want to contribute, or we? I think we're okay. Beautiful. All right. If anyone, I hope everyone got something out of today, whether they're here or online. I think the more that we can sort of just have conversations about things that we deem important when it comes to somebody's just health regimen in general, it'll at least spark some interesting conversations and get people thinking about how they operate and what they truly want to get out of their health, which I just truly don't think people do enough of. And then they wonder why certain things are happening in their health and wellness routine outside of what they truly want. So hopefully this changed a few views on how people will attack their training, not just at 40 and beyond, but to be honest, across all age demographics to truly get the most out of their movement regimen.